Have you ever been called crazy for feeling something too deeply, for seeing something before anyone else could see it, for knowing something in your heart that you couldn't get explained? Have you ever felt so sure of a truth that others couldn't accept, only to be mocked, ignored, and left standing alone in silence? If that's you, then listen closely, because everything they laughed at, everything they dismissed you for, everything they said was nonsense, is starting to unfold right in front of their eyes. And now, they remember. They laughed at the storm until the storm reached them, until it cracked the ground beneath their feet. And now, they call the thunder wise. Now, they call it divine. But not long ago, they mocked it. They did the same to you. They rolled their eyes when you spoke, labeled you unhinged, said you were imagining things, that you were out of touch with reality. But the truth is, you were never out of touch. You were tuned into something they couldn't hear. You weren't unstable. You were too steady in a world that feared change. The only thing you were out of was their league. What they didn't realize is that by mocking you, they weren't just pushing away a person. They were rejecting the very force that sent you. They weren't challenging your thoughts. They were challenging the universe itself. And no one wins that war. You were never lost. You were never broken. You were just far ahead. While they clung to comfort, routine, and shallow explanations, you were out there feeling the shifts, decoding the chaos, hearing the whispers from something higher. You were translating signals they didn't even know existed. And now, one by one, those very things you tried to explain are happening. And suddenly, it's quiet. That silence is deafening, louder than every insult they ever threw at you. And it's not peace. It's the sound of regret. You weren't speaking nonsense. You were remembering. You weren't confused. You were clear. They called it madness only because your clarity came before their language could catch up. They weren't ready for someone who could speak in symbols, in feelings, in energy, in vision. While they were still echoing noise, you were broadcasting truth, and that made you terrifying. But the universe doesn't pick people randomly. It chooses those strong enough to hold fire without burning out. It chooses those who are willing to stand in the storm without losing their voice. It chooses those who are not looking for comfort, but for purpose. That's why it chose you. Not because you were perfect, but because you were willing. Because even in your darkest hours, even when they left you, even when they laughed at you, you didn't let go of what you knew deep inside. You felt alone, not because you were forgotten, but because you were rare. And rare doesn't mean unworthy. It means sacred. It means essential. Your isolation was not exile. It was preparation. While they partied in distraction, you were being sharpened in silence. While they chased attention, you were being trained in alignment. While they played it safe, you were walking through fire. And now, that fire is showing. Now the truth is undeniable. And you don't need to explain anymore. You don't need to beg anyone to listen. Your life is the message. Your being is the evidence. The same people who laughed are now watching. Not to mock, but to understand. They're scrambling to figure out how you knew. But you didn't guess. You remembered. You were never making it up. You were receiving it. You were built for this. You were born for this. This is your moment. Not the end, but the beginning. Because now everything is shifting. Now the signs are aligning. Now the truth is landing exactly the way you said it would. And if what they once mocked is now unfolding word for word, then this message isn't just content, it's confirmation. It's a mirror of everything you've held on to when no one else could see it. They said you were too much. You were never too much. They were just too small to hold you. They were too afraid to follow you. They were too asleep to recognize what they were witnessing. You weren't asking for validation. You were carrying something holy, something ancient, something divine. And now, they know. Now they remember the things you said, the warnings you gave, the truths you spoke, and they're trying to keep up. But they can't outrun the truth, because the truth is here, and it has your name written all over it. You are never the storm's messenger. You are the storm itself, quiet, invisible, building, and now you've arrived. And this time, they cannot ignore you. Let them scroll back through old messages. Let them remember the way they left you on read. Let them sit in the echo of the words they once mocked. Let your presence be the contradiction to their disbelief. Let your stillness speak louder than their laughter ever did. You don't have to prove anything. You already did. With your silence, with your strength, with your survival. Because you survived it all. You survived their mockery, their judgment, their rejection, their silence. You survived the long nights, the confusion, the questions, the loneliness. You survived carrying a truth no one wanted to hear. You were chosen not to be praised, but to hold something that only a few ever carry. A light so strong that even at your dimmest, you still shine too bright for their comfort zones. They didn't attack you because you were wrong. They came for you because your truth exposed everything false in them. You were the mirror. You were the reflection of what they didn't want to see in themselves. And now that everything is coming true, they're not rushing to support you. They're trying to make sense of how they missed it. But you didn't miss it. You were born for it. You were always listening, always seeing, always feeling. You didn't hallucinate. You received a download before the world had the words for it. You were living in tomorrow while they were stuck in yesterday. You weren't broken. You were just broadcasting on a higher frequency. And they couldn't hear you, not because you were wrong, but because they weren't ready. And now that they are, you don't need to shout. Just stand. Just walk. Just be. Let the truth move through you like it always has. They didn't fear you. They feared the quake inside your words. They feared that if even one thing you said was true, everything they built would fall apart. So they tried to silence you, tried to label you, but they couldn't erase you, because the truth never disappears. It just waits. And when it rises, it doesn't need permission. So now, let them remember. Let them replay every conversation, every warning, every vision you tried to share. Let them face what they tried to bury. You were not the threat. You were the mirror. You were the signal. You were the wake-up call. You were never crazy. You were just early. In a world that resists anything that shows up before it's popular, truth always looks like madness at first, but only for a while. Because eventually, the storm you carried comes. The world shifts. The veil lifts. And the ones who mocked you fall silent. And when they do, don't shrink. Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just remember who you are. Remember what you carry. Remember what you survived. You aren't sent to fit in. You were sent to shake the foundation. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to awaken. You weren't made for approval. You were made for impact. This is your moment. This is your time. And you're not alone anymore. The universe is walking with you just like it always has. It's your turn to rise without asking for permission. The truth has landed. And it looks like you. You weren't imagining things. You weren't being dramatic. You weren't exaggerating. What you were feeling was real. What you were sensing was truth trying to break through. While everyone else was caught up in distractions and noise, you were paying attention. You were seeing what others refused to look at. You weren't trying to cause panic. You weren't trying to create fear. You were simply trying to express what your soul already knew. You felt the shifts before they became visible. You sensed the collapse before the structure even started to shake. You weren't talking in stories. You were describing reality that hadn't arrived yet. You weren't forecasting doom to get attention. You were speaking truth because you couldn't stay silent anymore. But the people around you weren't ready. They didn't have the emotional strength or the clarity to understand what you were trying to say. So instead of asking questions, instead of listening with open hearts, they turned on you. They rejected your truth because it made them uncomfortable. They mocked your insight because it made them nervous. They laughed at you not because they truly found you funny, but because deep down they were scared. Scared of how much you saw. Scared of how clearly you felt things. Scared that if you were right, then their entire world was wrong. And they weren't ready to face that. You became the mirror they were too afraid to look into. And when people are afraid of a mirror, they don't clean it. They try to break it. They attacked you not because you were dangerous, but because you were different. Because you were awake in a world that sleeps with its eyes open. Because you could see through what others accepted blindly. And when people aren't ready to wake up, they will call the one who is awake crazy. That's what happened to you. You were never weak. You were never lost. You were never unstable. You were just early. You saw through the illusion while they were still decorating it. You felt the truth while they were still trying to hide from it. You sensed the earthquake while everyone else danced on the cracks. And because you were first to feel it, they turned you into the threat. They said you were unstable when really you were just shaking off the lies. They said you were emotional when really you were deeply connected. They said you were delusional when really you were intuitive. They needed to say these things to protect themselves from the truth you carried. It wasn't about you. It was about what you represented. You were proof that the world they trusted was falling apart. And rather than accept that, they tried to make you the problem. But now, everything you felt, everything you warned about, everything you tried to explain, it's all happening. Not in dreams, not in riddles, in headlines, in families, in everyday life. The collapse you saw is no longer a warning. It's here. The systems you spoke about are breaking down. The masks are falling off. The roles are being questioned. The silence is becoming unbearable. And the very people who mocked you, doubted you, dismissed you, they don't know what to do anymore. They are confused. They are scared. They are silent. They are trying to figure out if they should say they were wrong or pretend they never judged you. Some will try to act like they always believed you. Some will try to rewrite history in their favor. But you will know. You will feel it. Because you were there before them. You carried this truth alone while they laughed. You held this burden when no one believed you. You stood in the fire they couldn't even see. Now the fire is everywhere, and they are running out of places to hide. You don't need to say, "I told you so." The world is screaming it for you. The proof is in the air. The silence of those who once shouted over you is enough. Let this remind you of something powerful. You were not attacked because you were wrong. You were attacked because you were right too soon. You were not feared because you were broken. You were feared because you could see. They didn't attack your weakness. They attacked your vision. You weren't targeted because you were lost. You were targeted because you had a map. But the world wasn't ready to be led. Not by someone like you. Not by someone who didn't need their permission. Not by someone who moved with inner knowing instead of outside approval. The crowd always turns cruel when someone evolves faster than they're prepared for. You weren't treated badly because you were flawed. You were treated badly because you were free. And your freedom exposed their chains. Your independence showed them their dependence. Your clarity made their confusion louder. Your calm presence made their panic louder. Your quiet truth made their loud lies shake. So they pushed you away, not because they hated you, but because they hated what you awakened in them. And now, the moment has come. Everything you saw, felt, dreamed, it's arriving. The volume is up. The veil is thinner. The simulation is glitching. The system is breaking. The fog is lifting. And the people who once thought you were crazy are now quoting your words, repeating your ideas, even using your phrases. They might not give you credit. They may not apologize, but their actions will speak louder than their past judgments. You'll see it in their silence. You'll feel it in their shift, because truth has a way of surfacing, and your truth has now become their reality. Don't let their past opinions shrink your present power. Don't let their old labels steal your current strength. You were never meant to be accepted. You were meant to be undeniable. You were never here to be normal. You were here to be new. Your mind wasn't broken. It was being rebuilt. You weren't falling apart. You were falling into place. What they called dysfunction was actually transformation. What they called confusion was just expansion. What they called a breakdown was actually a breakthrough in slow motion. You were being upgraded, inside and out. Your system was shifting. Your soul was remembering. Your thoughts were rearranging. Your heart was rewiring. And that kind of growth doesn't come with instructions. So society labeled it wrong. But the labels never fit you. You were never too much. You were just too ahead. You were never too sensitive. You were just deeply connected. You were never too emotional. You were just emotionally aware. You were never too strange. You were just too real. And in a world that runs on illusions, realness is often the first thing to be attacked. They gaslit you because you saw the lie and refused to pretend it was truth. You saw the cage and called it out while everyone else was decorating it. You saw the play and stopped clapping. You saw the script and walked off stage. You refused to wear the mask they gave you. You refused to act like the system was fine, and that refusal made you dangerous in their eyes. Not because you were dangerous, but because you were different. You were awake while they were trying to sleep. You were grounded while they were floating in fantasy. You were listening to your soul while they were obeying the system. That made them nervous, so they turned their fear into attack. But here's the truth. You didn't miss anything. You saw more than most. You didn't break down. You broke free. You didn't lose touch with reality. You lost tolerance for pretending. You didn't disconnect from the world. You disconnected from the false one. You stopped nodding to lies. You stopped smiling through nonsense. You stopped laughing at pain. You stopped clapping for manipulation. And in doing that, you became the threat. Not because you were trying to be, but because your truth was louder than their illusion. They didn't understand you, so they labeled you. They couldn't explain you, so they excluded you. They couldn't guide you, so they called you lost. But you weren't lost. You were just being led by something deeper than what they knew. You weren't out of touch. You were out of range. You were no longer part of their game. So they tried to call you the problem. But now the game is ending. The rules are breaking. The stage is burning. And the truth you carried is all that remains. You didn't survive the fire just to become smoke. You didn't walk through the darkness just to dim your light. You didn't carry the burden of being misunderstood just to ask for permission later. You came here to remember who you are and to remind others of the same. So stand tall, not because they finally believe you, but because you never needed them to. You were never crazy. You were calibrated. You were never broken. You were becoming. You were never unstable. You were just unbound. And now the world is catching up to the truth you've known all along. You weren't the threat because you ran from the system. You were the threat because you walked away without asking, without begging, without looking back. You didn't break the rules. You broke the spell. And that's why they tried to erase you. But the truth can't be erased. And now that the lights are on, they can't unsee what you've been saying all along. You didn't escape. You just refused to stay. And that choice made you the one who was never really in the cage at all. So here you are. The person they once called lost is now the one they look to for guidance. The person they once ignored is now the echo they hear in everything. And the person they once feared is now the evidence that truth always rises. You were never broken. You were chosen. And now, your time has come.